Good morning. Now, as per subscriber request, I apologise, I don't remember who asked me, but somebody did. What influences what bag I use, what kit I use, and how do I actually get it all in there? Obviously this dependent to seasons, summer and winter. At the moment, winter time, it's heavier. And while we're thinking about heavy, weight, another question I get quite a bit. I'm not one of these ultralight guys, far from it. From what lightweight gear I have used in the past, I find yes, it's light, but it's expensive and it tends to be a bit on the weak side. It's all right if you're sort of out in the open, but if you're in this sort of environment, it's very easy to get a twig poke a hole in something, a thorn tear something or whatever. I tend to default to heavier grade stuff, quite often ex-military type kit. So summertime, on average, depending on the weather, probably looking at 15 to 17 kilos, all in, including food, water and everything else, and maybe a beer. Winter time could be anywhere 17 to 20. Now I know for a lot of people, especially the backpackers, I think, Christ, that's heavy. And it is heavy, but I'm not walking that far. I'm walking maybe a mile maximum. So it's not the end of the world to have a load of weight. And of course, when you leave in the morning, you've drunk your water, you've already had your food, everything else, your bag's lighter on the way out, isn't it? So, yes, let's have a look in here. Right, I suppose we start off, before we unpack, talking a little bit about bag choice. There's thousands on the market in hundreds of sizes, so it's very much a personal thing. What you like to carry, how much space you actually need. I tend to go for bigger bags. Let's face it, you haven't got to fill them up. It's not the end of the world if it's only half full. I like a lot of the military bags because they're quite modular. If it's summertime, I don't need the space. The big side pockets zip off, so I can have a smaller bag. They're just a little bit more adaptable, I find. Another thing, some bags you'll find the main internal space has pockets, dividers and that sort of thing in it. I'm not a fan of that. I find it restricts how much I can pack, because the items you want to pack are never the size of the containers within, shall we say. So they just get in the way and take up space. I prefer one big space inside. I like pockets as much as you can sort your stuff out into separate groups, that's great, but if I'm having pockets, I want them on the outside, not inside. Now this military bag, I've chosen this one for today to show as an example for a couple of reasons really. One, it's probably the bag I use the most, but two, it's the most recognisable bag, certainly for people in the UK. Everybody would have seen a military Bergen. They're so common, they're not expensive, they're tough as old boots, they really are. You've got to go some to damage one of these. And yes, it's a bit heavier than a lightweight bag, but I have no issues with it whatsoever. I can drag it on the floor, throw it off, it can fall out the car, it doesn't matter. It just puts up with it. So that's why I've chosen this bag to show. It'll be more familiar to most people. Now, as far as how I separate stuff out, and none of this stuff you're going to see is expensive stuff. I don't do expensive, generally speaking. I'm just tight. And if I'm not paying too much, the more gear I can buy, rather than being restricted to one expensive setup. I like to mix things up a bit. So starting with the little front pouch here, the front pocket. This is stuff that I might need easy access, not necessarily quick access, we're not in a military situation, but an easy access to. So what I like in here is things like my head torch, my little Flextail air pump, which even if I'm not using an airbed, always comes with me because it's a great little lantern to use as well. The only other things in here are a first aid kit, which I'll always carry, and a pack of wet wipes because they're so useful. Whether it's, you know, cleaning your equipment, cleaning yourself if necessary, and I don't just mean your hands. Wet wipes are well worth carrying. You know, they save using water and other stuff. They're just very, very handy. And although I haven't packed one there because I forgot, perfect honest, zip seal freezer bags. Normally pack a small one, have it stuffed in there. Something like wet wipes and so on. Once they're a bit mucky and dirty, stick them in a zip seal bag. Keeps it separate from the other stuff, keeps the other stuff clean. The big top lid. Now today, I don't think there's anything in there, oh, apart from the tripod bag. If I'm carrying a lot of stuff, my food I would tend to put up here, out of the way, just so it doesn't get crushed with the other stuff. And maybe a beer or two, that sort of thing. But I don't use that quite so much. If the weather's looking iffy, maybe I'd stuff in my poncho in there, something like that. For inside, I always pack in a certain order. Mainly, you know, it's just how I find it the most convenient. And right on the top, the ground sheet. Now, it doesn't have to be anything flash, you can use anything really as a ground sheet. This is actually the bottom out of an old tent. It's about 8 foot by 6, something like that, and this would go under my tent to help keep it dry. Maybe increase the waterproofing if it's not a particularly waterproof tent, as some of the cheap ones are. It's my ground sheet if I'm using my hammock, something to step out on without having to put my shoes on, that sort of thing. And also when I'm first setting up, if the ground's a bit manky like it is at the moment, we've had so much rain, I'll spread this out, get all my kit out, organise myself so I know what I'm doing, I can see exactly what I've got. So this ground sheet is nearly always at the top. The next thing is my chair, my trespass chair. Bloody great thing, heavy, but it's the most comfortable one I've ever used. Anybody can be uncomfortable. I don't care if your chair is ultra light and this, that and the other. If it's not comfortable, in my mind, not worth taking. This is heavy, but it's comfortable, so it's coming with me. My tarp. Now, I'll always pack this, and it doesn't matter whether I'm hammock or tent. The fact that you've got the tarp, if the weather turns rubbish, you can put up an outside shelter. If something should happen to your tent, you can stick this over the top of it as an extra layer. It just has so many uses, and for its pack size, it's coming with me. My sleep mat. This is the only expensive bit of gear I've got really, and I've only got this because it was a present. Personally, I wouldn't have spent this much money. It's wonderful. It is the best sleep mat I've ever had. End of the story. But I couldn't justify that because I'm a tightwad. But the fact it was a present, brilliant. Stuff down the side, I won't pull it right out, is my tent. In here at the moment, I've got the backwoods bungalow. So that's stuffed vertically on one side. And the rest of this bag is my army sleeping bag, just stuffed in loose, not in a stuff sack. Now, you see a lot of people put their bags in loose in the bottom, and that works sometimes. I find the bigger bags, it's a good idea, because when you put them in the stuff sack, you end up with a football about this size. And it's very rare it go in the bag and fit snug in the bottom of the bag. There'll always be little gaps and wasted space. At least when it's loose, you can like push it into all the corners, take up all the room you need. It makes more sense. With my smaller sleeping bags for the summer, I always use the stuff sack because you can ratchet them down so small that they'll go anywhere. But the big bags, I tend to leave them loose. So that is all that's in there. In the side here, another reason I like these bags is the huge side pockets, is my cook set, which is bloody massive. And the reason it's so big is it's not just a cook set. There is my gloves in there, there's my separate mug in there, there's my fire lighting kit in there, there's windshields, there's fuel, there's normally a supply of coffee, all manner of things in there, but in this nice waxy bag. Keeps it all together nice. It is quite bulky. If it's summertime, I'm using a smaller bag. Obviously it won't fit in the side pockets. It has to go in the main body. But that basically is what lives in that side. Oh, ration pack. There's always at least one, just in case I get stuck. Opposite side, I've got some more weight in the opposite side to sort of balance this one out. Because there's nothing worse than trying to walk with an unbalanced bag. It just feels completely wrong. In here, a pillow. My glasses, I do need to use them for little things. My setup pouch, and this is something else that comes with me on every trip, because I can do most things with it in conjunction with my tarp. In here there's pegs, a couple of guy lines, adjustable guy lines with carabiners to clip on. There's short bits of paracord for making prusik knots, that sort of thing. I've got 10 meters of ridgeline in there. It's all the sundry setup bits and pieces. There's feeling it. There's even a couple of bungees in there and that sort of thing. So I can construct any sort of shelter with that. And then I've got a couple of the military water bottles. They hold almost a litre, I think. 2 of them, 24 hours. I'm absolutely fine. Yeah, 4 in there. And my knife lives in there as well. So that's basically what I would carry on a normal camp. Obviously the tent would be traded out for a hammock sometimes, but as far as cook set, tarp, ground sheet, chair, pillow, water bottles, all that sort of stuff is with me every time. There's not much that needs changing out, so it's always roughly the same sort of bulk. The only thing that the weight changes is the actual shelter. The backwards bungalow that I've got today is quite light. Obviously on occasions I'll use the Dutch Army tent, which weighs a bloody ton. I love it, it weighs a ton. So that's where the variables in the weight come. That and the sleeping bag. The sleeping bags don't vary too much. My big heavy winter bags are probably about 2 kilos. My lightest, smallest summer bag, the jungle bag, I think it's a shade under 1 kilo. So there's only a kilo difference from one extreme to the other on the bags. So yeah, that's what I've got in there. So that's my basic setup. Most of these things come with me every trip. The sleeping bag, of course, depending on the season, will get changed out. I have multiple bags. Shelter, sometimes it's just the tarp, but a tent, got various tents. Sometimes that'll be swapped out for hammock, depending on how I feel, what the weather's like. But most of these things are what come with me every time. And as you can probably see, none of it is expensive gear. It really isn't. Chair's about 25 quid. The cook set, I've no idea, because it's sort of made up with bits and pieces and components from other stuff, so just bits that I've gathered up. The pillow, I've no idea, but they're not expensive. The sleep mat, yes, that was expensive. Surplus water bottles, they're 2 a penny. A decent tarp, 30 quid, maybe 40 quid, depending what you're buying, how big, that sort of thing. But 30-40 pounds, well worth it for what you can do. The bags, they have gone up dramatically in costs recently. I don't know whether they've suddenly become more popular, or maybe there's a shortage of them, perhaps. That obviously, you know, affects prices. I think mine was about £25, £30, including the pouches. Just be careful if you do go to buy one. Quite often you'll see the bag like this. When you buy it, it's just the main section and the pouches are extra, so keep an eye out for that. But the pouches are certainly worth having. You can get so much extra in them. There is actually a separate yoke. You very rarely get it with a bag, you might have to buy it separately. But you can detach the 2 pouches and just fit them to the yoke and have a small day sack. So it's quite versatile. So, you know, none of this stuff is expensive. I don't do expensive. But it will take me wherever I want to go in any weather condition, as long as I've got the right bag with me. Right, got to put it all back in now. See you on the next video.